Hello, lovely internet people. I just wanted to make a little ranting video. I'm gonna preface the whole rant by saying I don't have a psychology degree. I don't have a bachelor's. I do have an associate's, and I did take psychology and abnormal psychology classes during my college years of earning my associate's degree, which has been quite a while ago. So please do not take anything I say as a final authority. And I am going to be adding in my own opinions that are not backed up by any kind of people in the psychology field. This is just my own musings that I'm going to go by, and also that my interpretation of what I'm about to talk about is just my interpretation. Okay? So no one come for me. I wanted to talk a bit about something I've been thinking of, which was Freud's work on the id, the ego, and the superego. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Freud's understanding and work, here's a quick rundown. Id is basic need, right? Think I'm hungry, so I'm gonna eat now, whether I have my own food or not, right? Ego, sorry, there's hair on my phone. Ego is something that helps us keep id desires in check, basically. From Freud's understanding, is the part of the mind that says, yeah, I'm hungry in the middle of the meeting, but I can't just get up and leave because this other person has expectations of me, right? And so he also, my understanding of his definition of superego is it's that part of us that has had these morals and values instilled that tells our ego what we need to be feeling in order to combat id, basically, right? So it's kind of like a trinity of levels of mentality or parts of consciousness in the mind, right? So I kind of just want to riff off of his definitions and expand on them in my own view. So id is like our base desires, primal. Freud highlights a lot of aggressive and sexual desires that lie in the id, but I want to expand off of that and say that id is kind of like the part of the mind that speaks just for the body. It says, I'm hungry now. It says, I have to shit now, or I need sex now, or I need people to care about me now. Like, it's these basic desires, these primal desires that humans have of needing shelter and water and food and connection and, these different base primal needs, right? So I agree with him on all that, obviously, with a little bit of an expansion to go beyond just sexual and aggressive desires being the main driving forces behind id. Though those are, I believe, some of the most primal forces that human beings have, right? Because if you think about it, as our survival, before we became civilized or living in modern day societies, the way we survived was by making sure no one killed us, and maybe that meant killing them first, and then by reproducing. So yeah, those are some two very base primal desires, right? And then he goes on to ego. And so I kind of want to add my own flavor to this understanding. I know that the New Age spiritual community gives a lot of negative connotation to ego, but the way that I see ego, both with the Freud definition and even the New Age definition, is that ego is simply the body's sense of self, a sense of separate identity from others. So in that definition, when a human being has killed their ego or no longer has a sense of ego, they end up in a psych ward because they don't know who they are. They don't recognize or accept that their body is indeed separate from everyone else's. And in this loss of ego, we also lose the ability to recognize id, right? So when someone has truly experienced a permanent loss of ego, or even a very long temporary loss of ego, that's why we see things like neglecting bodily needs, perhaps not cleaning their home, letting it fill up like a hoarder home full of trash. They can neglect even to give themselves food or water because they are not dealing with a sense of self, right? And when we have a physical body, we have to have a sense of self because our physical bodies are very much indeed separate from others, right? So ego, I see it as simply the awareness that we ourselves are separate from others, right? And so from there, we can choose if we want to let ego run free and say, well, I see that I'm different and separate from others, but so that must make me better, right? And then there are others that use their ego and say, wow, I am separate and different from everyone else. I would like to help the others, right? And so it's kind of like with money. People can use it for all kinds of good things, donate to charities, save literal human lives, and others will hoard it like a dragon for their ego. But so ego is just that sense of self. I believe when ego becomes that negatively connotated word is when ego supersedes others' egos, right? When our own individual ego is on the kick saying, I'm so different and separate from everyone, I must be better, right? Because we can realize we're separate and also not think we're better, right? And so I think ego too can be one of those things that allows us to say, like, oh man, I'm hungry, but I see this other person separate from me as a child and they're hungry, and so I'm going to deny my id desire to eat and choose to give to someone else, right? And so that's kind of where Freud comes in with the superego. And so I don't really like his definition of superego that I am familiar with, and maybe I just don't have a good grasp on the understanding or the definition, because the way that Freud describes superego is like this trained part of our brain that absorbed all our parents' rules and shames the id and all this stuff. And I don't really think that would necessarily be how I describe what superego is, but I do kind of think that superego is more so kind of that bridge between ego and collective consciousness. And that's coming from my own spiritual bias. I don't have facts or proof. You can argue with it, you can not believe it. That's perfectly fine, because this is just an opinion. So, and just kind of my own musings too, because I may come to another understanding of superego, because I'm gonna watch more videos on the superego after this. But I had a lot going on in my brain and I wanted to share it. And so I started going off on, well, if ego is the sense of identity and self, that awareness of separation, would not the next step of the mind's conscious capability be, if id is the me, and ego is the wow, we're separate, then superego would be the wow, we are all together in our separateness, right, as the human species. It's that kind of transcendental kind of mindset that goes beyond us versus them, I believe. And so that would be in Freud's own theories, that would kind of explain why he believes that is the bit of us that has these morals and values, that it helps influence our ego to keep it in check, right? And so, too, I find it interesting, this triad setup, similar to the mind, body, spirit balancing path that I've been on. And of course, we see the triad in like Christian belief of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, right? And so I just find it really interesting how across various different kinds of subjects, we see the importance of three things being in balance, right? Or three things interacting with one another in harmony. And so I think really, maybe I'm just finding patterns where they aren't any, but I just kind of, it seems almost synchronous in our way, that Freud would have come up with three parts of the mind, and then, now we are at a understanding in the psychological fields where we understand that the mind is part of our well-being, but we also need body health and spiritual health. And, science is not necessarily saying the spiritual health bit. That's me, more so. But we have seen in science that when people are in higher spirits or good moods or have faith that they'll recover, that can aid in healing or recovery, right? And science doesn't have a way to explain why it does yet, but it is there in data, even if it doesn't have a direct cause or if there isn't a complete understanding of why this can happen, or why people in higher spirits or with faith that they will recover do oftentimes recover more than the people who have given up or are ready, feel like they're ready to die, rather, or, that kind of thing. So Yeah, I just kind of wanted to touch base on that and really about the ego, how it's really frustrating when I am hearing people talk about how they killed their ego so that they could become so spiritual. And it's like, that would make you insane if you don't have a sense of self. Like, just by society's standards, if you don't know that you're in a body separate from everyone else, you are not going to function properly in the physical realm. So we need ego. Ego is not inherently good or bad, I believe. I believe ego is neutral. It is just the sense of self, and it can go either way, right? If we want it to be good, we can. If we want it to be bad, or if we don't choose to take control of it, it may start going bad. But I really do think that ego, or sense of self and identity, is something that needs to be nurtured and supported and accepted in order for it to not run rampant and come up with these different kinds of defense mechanisms to protect itself. Because ego by itself, without superego, I believe, can be easily harmed, especially in humans that deny their sense of self, or they believe that who they are is not good enough. This leads to very fragile sense of self, right? If we're worried about how other people are going to perceive it, or if we're even valid in existing, right? And so when we have these kinds of fragile egos, the kinds of defense mechanisms that can happen, and I'm not going to go over all of them because there's a hell of a lot, but, and I don't know them all off the top of my head either, and I don't want to say some and forget one, but, these defense mechanisms can range from a lot of things to like projection or denial, all these things that we talk about in the psychological fields, which I'm not in the psychological field, just so you know, but that are, I guess, byproducts of what I believe is an unsatiated ego, one that is not being accepted by itself, right? And so in a way too, I kind of see this superimposition of id, ego, and superego as similar to id being body, ego being mind, superego being soul or spirit, right? And in this way, sometimes they are fighting against each other, right? Sometimes the body says, I just want to sleep. Sometimes the mind is like, nope, we've got to work. And then sometimes, it's some other way around. But like, we do have these separate pieces of ourselves as one whole human, right? And I think that's really what Freud was trying to get at. Of course, I don't know him. I've never met him. Haven't even read all of his stuff. So I don't know what he really was meaning or saying. But my interpretation is that he's kind of he was one of the first people to find a way to describe the different elements of consciousness and the different kind of like levels that we go through as we grow into a more self-aware human as an adult, right? Because id is very much like a childlike mentality, right? And many humans, I believe, I don't remember when Freud said id is in control, but we'll see with small children and toddlers that if they want a toy and they have not been taught not to, they will just grab the toy from another kid, right? And it's not because they're trying to be mean. They're not trying to bully. They just want the toy, and they don't have the awareness that, one, they are truly separate from the other. So this person is not going to feel joy when they get to feel joy and play with the toy, right? They don't understand that this person is going to feel sadness when they're feeling joy. It's kind of incomprehensible to the child mind that two different people are feeling two different emotions at the same time from the same action, right? It kind of seems like it blows some adults' minds, but they don't have this, what is it called? Like similar to like object permanence that is developed in children, this concept of like needing to consider others. When a child is developing, living in id is a survival tactic, right? Because children are small, vulnerable, weak. They can't reach the shelves to get the food themselves, So like it's a survival mechanism in the human species to have that primal desire and urge leading your actions, because how else are you going to survive? If you're a child and no one's taking care of you or feeding you, you're going to just have to eat when you find food. Doesn't matter the context or how other people feel about it, you need to survive, right? And but as we become older and more capable of defending ourselves in various ways, taking care of ourselves, We don't need to rely so much on those primal impulses, right? We can feel them, and then we can make sense of them, and then we can check in how we feel about them morally and ethically, and how we think that'll play out on a grander scale beyond ourselves. And so, yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of that. But yeah, I'm gonna go listen to more videos. I hope everyone has a good day. Bye!